about. And an article is coming out sometime in the future in the American Philatelics that Ron is doing. But let me introduce Ron. He's been collecting stamps on and off since he was 10. He currently lives in the Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania area and a worldwide collector, but semi-specializes in the US, Confederate States, and Canada. He has several topical collections, including horror, Hitchcock, and summer on stamps. He has various cover collections, including covers from the US Navy ships named after local places, local postal history, and local philatelic history. He's a member of various philatelic societies and is the founder, president, and newsletter editor of the Wyoming Valley Stamp Club. He's been retired from his job as a litigation paralegal for a little bit over a year. So
2 years now.
What's that?
2 years now.
Yeah. Well, you've given so many presentations for us, and just you could have had a new job. But yeah, so please join me in welcoming Ron Breznay to us. And if you could take off or put your speak on mute, we'll be glad. And it's all yours, Ron.
Okay. One of my favorite places to visit at the American Philatelic Society headquarters in Bellefonte is the Headsville Post Office. I make it a point to stop in every time I visit there. Now, as you probably know, the Headsville Post Office was built in Headsville, Mineral County, West Virginia in the 1860s as a post office and general store. In the early 1970s, it was disassembled and moved to the National Museum of History and Technology at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. Around 2007, the post office was moved to the American Philatelic Society headquarters in Bellefonte, where it remains to this day on permanent loan from the Smithsonian. It is the original post office, not a reproduction, and it's not just a museum piece that you admire from behind a velvet rope. You can actually go inside and look around. It's a contract postal unit, so you can buy stamps and post mail there. Now, this presentation traces the history of the Headsville Post Office from its original location to its installation at the Smithsonian, and finally to its current home at the American Philatelic Center. The original Headsville Post Office was established on January 2nd, 1813 as Sheets's Mill with Charles Marshall as postmaster. At the time, the town was in what was then Hampshire County, Virginia. In 1863, that section of the state split off from Virginia and became West Virginia, and in 1866, Mineral County was carved out of Hampshire County. This is an illustration of a cover from Sheets's Mill, which would have been mailed before 1855, as it is a stampless cover. It shows 12.5 cents postage was paid. And this is an illustration of a cover to Sheets's Mill. The post office was discontinued on May 3rd, 1815, and then reestablished on January 14th, 1828, with Frederick Sheets initially serving as postmaster. Then Henry Head served as postmaster from February 26, 1855 to February 23rd, 1857, and again from March 24th, 1858 until the post office was discontinued on September 29th, 1866. The above illustrations are from the book American Post Offices by Carl Scheele of the Smithsonian. And this is the page from the book about Headsville. Now, the building housing the Headsville Post Office was constructed in the early 1860s as a general store, and the post office was established in the store on March 5th, 1868, with Henry Head as postmaster. At some point, living quarters existed above the store and in a smaller building attached to the back of the post office. And this is where the postmaster and his family lived. Now, I was speaking with Ed McDonald, who is vice president of the Mineral County Historical Society, and is a great-great-grandson of Henry Head. He told me that the Headsville store / post office stood on his family's property, the McDonald family farm. And another member of the Mineral County Historical Society, Terry Bisek, told me that his mother-in-law has a model of the post office that someone made many years ago. This shot of the model shows a familiar front of the building, and this one shows a not so familiar back of the building. Now, Henry Head wasn't the only postmaster. This chart shows all the Headsville postmasters. These were in the building that we know of, and then this was in another building that John Staggs built when he became postmaster, or moved the post office to when he became postmaster. Now, this report, signed by Henry Head on April 28, 1868, was directed to the Post Office Department topographer, showing the exact location of the post office for postal mapping purposes. And this is another report filed in 1898, and it was signed by then Postmaster Thomas B. Doman. Now, this cover shows a Headsville postmark from 1882. I don't have this cover, but I found the image online. The covers I do have include this one from April 2nd, 1906, with what is called a Doan cancellation. Now, I made a minor philatelic discovery with this cover, as a earliest known use of this Doan cancellation was April 3rd, 1906. Now, Doan cancels were the Post Office Department's first attempt to improve postmark legibility by issuing rubber hand stamps. Prior to this, cancels were made from cork, metal, wood, or other materials, sometimes hand-carved. And the name honors Edith R. Doan, a postal historian who, in the 1950s, became interested in these early 20th century hand stamps. She published her first research findings in 1978. Now, this cover was addressed to Homer, Illinois, and the back shows the receiving mark from Homer on April 3rd. And this is another Doan cancellation on February 10th, 1900 something. I can't make out the fourth digit of the year. The postmark or postcard is from the Jamestown Exposition, which is held from April 26th to December 1st, 1907. So the postmark could be 1907 if the postcard were bought before the exposition, or perhaps later, but not earlier than 1907, considering the earliest known use of this postmark. Now, when John E. Staggs became postmaster of Headsville on March 8, 1914, he moved the post office to his own general store, apparently shown in this cachet. And Henry Head's store continued operating until it went out of business during the Depression era of the 1930s. John Staggs' post office continued in operation until December 31st, 1951, as shown in this last day of post office cover. And Staggs signed this report to the Post Office Department topographer on May 21st, 1928, and this one on May 9th, 1942. John Staggs was still the postmaster at the end of 1951 when the post office closed. And then after the post office closed, Headsville's mail was routed to Kaiser, West Virginia, which is the county seat. And according to the headstone, John Staggs was postmaster for 38 years. Now, when Carl Sheely of the Smithsonian was searching for a post office to exhibit in the museum, he looked at over 600 post offices in 13 states. The one in Headsville was among the oldest he examined. Now, Ed McDonald told me that when Sheely was looking for a general store post office for the Smithsonian, he made a chance discovery of the Headsville post office. Sheely was driving around West Virginia and was stopped by a flagger at a road construction site. He asked the flagger if he knew of a general store post office in the area, and the flagger directed him to Headsville. Now, Shealy chose the Headsville Post Office for the Smithsonian because, as reported in a newspaper account at the time, quote, it had remained unaltered in structure, both inside and out, from its earliest days. The original counters, shelving, floor, windows, shutters, walls, and ceiling were intact. And then continuing the quote, there are even inscriptions written on the shutters by Civil War soldiers stationed in the area or who passed that way. And still continuing to quote, an iron pot-bellied stove had been added before the close of the 19th century, and building was wired for electric lights about World War I, but these changes seem to be the only alterations to the original structure, with the exception of a front porch we believe was added prior to 1900, end quote. Now, Ed McDonald told me that his grandfather sold the building to the Smithsonian for $7,500. And when they purchased it, the building still contained the general store's original stock of non-perishable goods, including high-button shoes, spices, patent medicines, slate pencils, and poultry lice medicine. Now, a Smithsonian restoration specialist named Charles H. Rowell, assisted by Reverdy Marcy, carefully took the building apart bit by bit, coding each piece. Then the post office was reassembled at the Smithsonian's National Museum of History and Technology. In the 1980, the museum was renamed the National Museum of American History. And these photos show the installation of the post office exhibit at the Smithsonian. The dedication of the post office was scheduled for September 27th, 1971 at 2:00 p.m. This is an invitation to the dedication. And this postcard shows the National Museum of History and Technology. And this photo shows the exterior of the post office when it was at the Smithsonian. And this one shows the interior of the post office at the Smithsonian. The post office was dedicated on September 27, 1971 by Postmaster General Winton M. Blount. During the ceremony, Blount hand-canceled an envelope bearing the postage stamp showing the new logo, or the logo of the newly established United States Postal Service, as well as a 1946 commemorative stamp honoring the Smithsonian. He then hand-delivered the cover to Smithsonian Secretary S. Dillon Ripley as the crowd looked on. And these are some photos of the dedication of the post office exhibit at the Smithsonian. And also present was National Museum of History and Technology Director Daniel J. Borston. This photo shows the exterior of the post office at the Smithsonian, including a worker in period costume. And this is the program for the dedication ceremony. A little story about the post office there. Then this page from the program shows one of several substantially different cancellations that were used at the post office. One is at the Smithsonian. There are also varieties of these cancellations with slight differences. This program was signed by Postmaster General Blount. Now, the post office was a working post office at the Smithsonian with special cancellations used. And the most popular sale items were postcard stamps for tourists and current stamps for collectors. The January 2006 issue of Machine Council Forum, the Journal of the Machine Council Society, has an article about the flag cancellation used at the Headsville Post Office when it was at the Smithsonian. There were both machine cancels and hand cancels used. They are easy to tell apart, as the machine cancels have round postmarks, which the Machine Council Society calls dials. The hand cancels have oval postmarks. And all the cancels use a flag-shaped killer, which the Machine Council Society calls flags. For the machine cancels, the article lists 2 different dials and 2 different flags with 3 different combinations. And for the hand cancels, there's 1 dial and 5 different flags. There were 2 machine dials that were used. What is the difference between them? Dial 1 has no space between Smithsonian and station, and then dial 2 has a space. The two machine flags used had the same layout. The canton contains a drawing of the post office, and the stripes have the name of the museum. Flag 1 has the original name of the museum, the National Museum of History and Technology, and then flag 2 has the new name, the National Museum of American History. Dial 1 was used only with flag 1, and dial 2 was used with both flag 1 and flag 2. Therefore, there are three different machine cancellations. The combination of dial 1 and flag 1 was used from 1971 to 1973. Then the combination of dial 2 and flag 1 was used from 1974 to 1981. And then the combination of dial 2 and flag 2 was used from 1982 to 1989. And the machine cancels are used concurrently with the hand cancels. Now the hand cancels all had the same layout: an oval postmark, a flag with the name of the museum and the canton, and a separate drawing of the post office. First flag variety contained the first name of the museum, National Museum of History and Technology, and this was used from 1971 to 1981. And then this cover is from the dedication of the post office exhibit on September 27th, 1971. Hand flag 2 was a special cancellation for the opening up of the Hall of Stamps and the Mails, with this event noted in the stripes of the flag. Hand flag 2 was used from 1972 to 1973. And this cover marks the opening of the Hall of Stamps and the Mails on November 17th, 1972. Hand flag 3 was a special cancellation noting 100 years hailing to Apollo. And the cancellation has a picture of an Apollo spacecraft rather than the post office. And a commemorative slogan instead of the name of the museum in the canton. And hand flag 3 was used in 1972 and 1973. Now, Paul Heinlein was a German engineer who invented the first internal combustion engine to be used on an aircraft. This engine was first used in a dirigible in 1872. Now, this cover commemorates Apollo 13, which is headed for the moon, but because of equipment failures, was forced to loop around the moon and return to Earth. I couldn't find any significance in the date on the cover. Now, hand flags 4 and 5 have the new name of the museum, the National Museum of American History. And this cancellation has two varieties. In flag 4, the second A of American is over the Y in history, and in flag 5, the C in American is over the Y in history. Now, hand flag 4 was used beginning in 1981 until the post office closed at the Smithsonian in 2006. Now, November 2nd, 1982 was election day, and this cover was apparently in favor of a ballot question to approve the Constitution of New Columbia, that is statehood for Washington, D.C. And this cover was apparently opposed to the ballot question. Now, the ayes prevailed as the D.C. voters approved the Constitution. It doesn't appear that it went anywhere, as D.C. is still not a state. And hand flag 5 was used starting in 1986. This is an unofficial first day cover of the 1988 Christmas stamp with the cachet noting the general store and post office from Headsville, West Virginia. And this dual cover with hand flag 1 showing the last day of use of the National Museum of History and Technology cancellation on October 20th, 1981. And hand flag 4 showing the first day of use of the National Museum of American History cancellation on October 21st, 1981. The machine cancels were made using an old International Postal Supply Company HD2 model number 170 hand-driven canceling machine. These photos show an example of the HD2, but do not indicate the model number, and is not necessarily the machine that was used at the Smithsonian. The machine that was used there was found stored at the Topeka, Kansas post office, and Shealy had the machine shipped to Washington in August 1971, where the machine was restored. Pitney Bowes engraved a canceling die for the museum, and once restored for use, the cancellation machine was installed in the Headsville Post Office. Unfortunately, the machine impressions are generally poor because of worn parts that had not been able to be adjusted to perfection. Now, the interior of the post office was at the Smithsonian, was depicted on a mail order stamp in 1972. And this souvenir from 1972 shows the post office with period reenactors. The Hall of Stamps and the Mails opened on November 17, 1972. This precursor to the National Postal Museum was in the National Museum of History and Technology. This is the cover of the souvenir brochure for the event. The brochure has the mail order stamp along with the cancellation with the oval postmark with opening Hall of Stamps and the Mails and the stripes of the flag. In the back of the cover has a new stamp collecting stamp along with the First Day Council from New York City on November 17, 1972, the same day that the Hall of Stamps and the Mails opened. And the envelope that the brochure and some other items came in is also a First Day cover for the stamp collecting stamp. And the souvenir cover included in the mailing marks the opening of the hall. And the envelope also had a program for the dedication lecture, 125 Years of Philately. This cover shows a special duck stamp station postmark from June 30th, 1989. Now, the Smithsonian intended to keep the post office for only a short time, but it became so popular that they ended up keeping it for 35 years. In 2004, it was announced that the post office would be removed as part of a general renovation of the museum, and perhaps also because of the National Postal Museum, which opened in 1993. The post office was closed on July 21st, 2006, as shown on this last day cover. The National Museum of American History closed for extensive renovations from September 2006 to November 2008. On September 20th, 2006, the American Philatelic Society announced its proposal to relocate the post office from the Smithsonian to the American Philatelic Center in Bellefonte, Pennsylvania. The APS would build a special climate-controlled pavilion to house the post office. And the funding goal for the relocation was $350,000. And this is the headquarters of the American Philatelic Society in Bellefonte, and the entrance to the post office at the American Philatelic Center. Now, during Aero Philately 2007, held at the APS in October 2007, the new pavilion was dedicated. It was named the Gordon and Mary Morrison Pavilion. Now, Gordon Morrison was a former Assistant Postmaster General and very active, organized philately, including with the APS. His wife, Mary, was also a stamp collector and active in the stamp community. Mary passed away in 2002 before this dedication, and Gordon in 2021. And this cover for the dedication was signed by Stephen Reinhard, who was a judge of Aero Philately and later had a term as president of the APS. Peter Mastrangelo, then APS executive director, Gordon Morrison, and Janet Klug, the immediate past president of the APS at the time. Well, now this is a program for the dedication of the Morrison Pavilion. And this tells a little bit about the Morrisons. And this is the programming. And among those at the dedication were former Postmaster General Benjamin Baylor, Janet Klug, Charles J. Peterson, Secretary of the American Philatelic Research Library at the time, Gordon Morrison, and Ken Martin, then Executive Director of the APS. Instead of cutting a ribbon, they cut a coil of stamps. The Headsville Post Office opened at the American Philatelic Center on March 3rd, 2008. It opened as a contract postal unit. Now, according to the USPS website, the CPU is, quote, a supplier-owned or supplier-leased site operated by the supplier under contract to the Postal Service to provide postal products and services to the public at U.S. Postal Service prices, end quote. Though the post office opened on March 3rd, the dedication ceremony was held on June 21st, just before the 2008 APS Summer Seminar. Current U.S. stamps are for sale at the Headsville Post Office at the American Philatelic Center. The post office often has stamps that are not generally available in post office, post offices such as the classic Forever stamps of 2016. A mail sent from the post office. Mail may be sent from the post office with postmarks as shown here. Now I will conclude with a photo tour of the Headsville Post Office at the American Philatelic Center. Over the years, the post office has been stocked with antiques, many loaned by employees of the APS, and sometimes the employees took them with them when they left, so not all antiques in these photos are still on display. And it shows a counter where stamps are sold, and the stamps are available for sale at the time. And this is behind the sales counter. Antique phone, I don't know if that works. There's that potbelly stove, the original is still there. More antiques. And then this is an egg mailer. You actually put eggs in these individual compartments to protect them during mailing. And this is a photo of some members of my stamp club, the Wyoming Valley Stamp Club, at the post office during a field trip. From right are Jerry Cross, Mike Ritson, Tom Conti, Tom Bowman, who is here today, and yours truly. Now, before concluding, I would like to acknowledge the persons and organizations who provided information and items used in research and this presentation. So the Smithsonian Institution for various photos, Gary Lowe of the APS for photos and research documents, Lloyd DeVries of the Virtual Stamp Club for the photo of one of the Morrison Pavilion covers, Roger Skinner of the Western Philatelic Library for the copy of the Headsville Post Office Project brochure, Jim Stoltz for the Smithsonian Dedication Invitation Program and an article about the dedication, Scott Tiffany of the APS and the APRL for a behind-the-scenes tour of the post office, and Ed McDonald and Terry Bisek of the Mineral County Historical Society for information and photos. Okay, thank you. Any questions?
But a round of applause for Ron for a phenomenal presentation while we open it up to questions. Thank you, Ron. Just amazing, amazing research and presentation.
Yeah, Ron, I have a comment and a question. I think maybe we should start to scour people for donations for those shelves. They look very, very bare. And probably between a lot of us stamp collectors across the country, we could fill them up very nicely. And the question I have is, when it went to APS, who flinched first? Did APS say we would take it, or SI look for a place? Because you said they were not planning on having it long. Did they put out bids, or do you know how that transfer started?
Okay, yeah, I don't know that. That's interesting. I'll have to check
Yeah. I'm sure glad it went there, and you said it's permanent loan, so.
Yeah, I assume that because the Smithsonian probably can't give away or sell stuff, so they can only loan it out.
Yeah,
There's a way around that.
yeah. It gives them room for other things.
Ron, do you know what happened to all the stuff that was in the post office? They bought it with stuff. Where did the stuff go?
Well, some of it is there. I could see high button shoes and.
Yeah,
that-
not a lot.
No,
Pictures show it's stuffed with more things.
Are the doors which are signed by Civil War soldiers, are they still there in that?
yeah, they are still there. I tried to get a picture when I was out there, but I couldn't get a good enough picture of them.
They
Yeah,
look kind
they're
of
still
ratty.
there.
Yeah.
So Ron, just to clarify too, because the contents are in there. So the postmaster or the clerk's hand stamps were also part of this holding? The various cancellations that they used from over the years? Was that also preserved and staved and it's still there?
Not the original postmarks. No, I don't think so.
No. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Now the different cancels, were those ones that you got when you were there? At Heads visiting?
Yeah, these last ones I showed,
Mhm.
where are they? Yeah. Yeah, those I got when I was there.
Okay, yeah. So that's their APS's typical cancel.
Yes.
And the way to
Oh,
identify it is with that
No,
mail order stamp. Do they have those mail order stamps too?
I had to buy that somewhere else.
Okay. They ought to see Wayne Garrett probably get him a couple thousand. Sell them at a premium. Questions, folks?
So Ron, I mean, the stampless covers too, these are not common. I mean, I've looked these up over the years as well, and you rarely come across some of those from the early that you showed at the beginning, if you go back. Right,
Yeah.
I mean, these are just, most of these general stores, small post offices from these rural areas, didn't do a lot of mail. So the fact, even over the years that it was open, the fact that you got, a few within your holding is
Yeah,
significant, right?
I've been searching for years on eBay for covers from Headsville, and I only found these two.
Yeah, right. It's pretty amazing with the amount of covers that are out there that you only landed the two. But you now have a few more folks here, 30 plus, that are going to start looking for you, Ron. You might get a few emails after this.
And Ron, looking at that date, I think the postcard it was at 1908 when they became both sides address and mess, and so it's either like 7, 8, or 9, because it wouldn't be 10 because of the 0 there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they had that postcard development in 1907 with the split back, and but it says 1900, so maybe they did. So probably 7 or 8.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, Ron, you could put that through, there's no retro reveal anymore, but there's the postmark reveal, right.com. If you take an image, upload it, and let it run the imaging software, it will black out, it'll change the color spectrum, and you should be able to uncover that cancel. If you send me the image, well, I'll get it in the presentation. I'll put it through and see if we can't see what the date is, but I agree with you too, Paul. It's probably a 7, 8, or a 9.
Is
When that's
that
split on the
program,
back.
Charlie, as good as retro reveal?
The postmark reveal is not bad. It goes through like 15 or 20 different color
Okay.
filters. And
Mhm.
so it's actually fairly robust to be able to separate out the colors, the stamp, the background, and just give you what the cancel is. So
Yeah.
that'll probably help you, Ron, to decode that.
Okay, because I tried using colored photo filters to look at it, but they didn't help.
Now you want to go to, some of those filters and color spaces that are in the postmark reveal, just like retro reveal, are some really odd color spectrum, Ron, that Photoshop and others just don't allow you to do.
Yeah.
Beyond CMYK and RGB, it does some really interesting algorithms, and it will, hide the stamp behind you, get rid of the green. All you'll see is the black, or it'll highlight that and almost what looks like fluorescent or neon, and it really shows the black cancel really appropriate. So that'll probably help you decode the date.
Okay, I'll have to try that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
sure.
Well, thank you, Ron. Again, we really appreciate it. And that I'm scheduling for 2024. So to already get me. You always have such good ones for us. We look forward to it.
Thank you, Ron. Round of applause again. Just a phenomenal presentation. And if you're ever up at the APS, you know where to go. Ron
Mhm.
may be behind the counter canceling covers, so bring a few.
That would
Because
be
you-
nice. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Fantastic.